Hopefully we are now recording. Let me unpause my screen. Welcome to tonight's Preparing Your Team for Their Tournament. My name is Jill. I will be running tonight's presentation. Hopefully each of you were able to listen or join the last 2 weeks where we went through robot game questions, mission questions, as well as judging questions. So hopefully we don't have too many of those tonight. Otherwise, I'm going to punt those off. But this is all about the tournament day. I'm going to turn off my camera. That way I get a little bit more real estate. And we're going to go right into it. So the agenda for tonight is basically what happens at a tournament. What does the schedule look like? How to prepare yourself, the team, and your team parents. Some update on championships, and then awards and advancement at the end. You can ask questions in the question box. If you're on mobile or a device that doesn't have the same interface, you'll have to raise your hand, and I will try to watch for that. So just bear with me because I'm running tonight's webinar by myself. Okay. So some things to keep in mind about First LEGO League in general, and specifically about First LEGO League Challenge. It really is not about the competition. It's really about the process of getting to that point. And so the outcomes for a team actually are there whether you attend a tournament or not. So things like how do you work together in a team, some presentation skills, those type of things. Those are not ones you gain just by going to a tournament. The tournament is just a deadline. And so we really think of it as a celebration of, hey, you made it, right? You did all of the work, you're here, let's have fun, let's celebrate what the team has accomplished. I think the way to think about it, particularly for our rookies, is just like if you have ever gone or watched a golf tournament or participated in a golf tournament, even if you're not a good golfer, you can watch other golfers and admire their swing and their hole-in-one, and it doesn't make you feel bad. It's like, oh, that's way to go. You play your game, you do the best you can, but you recognize that there may be more skilled people that you can learn from, maybe pick up some tips from. And that's kind of what this is about, right? It's not about, sort of head-on-head competition, winner take all type of thing. It really is a collaborative environment, and we want to keep it that way. The challenge has 3 core aspects. They used to use this triangle icon. First LEGO League no longer uses it, but I actually like it a lot. So there's the core values, there's a robot, which has both a game and the robot design judging aspects of it, and then our project. And it's super relevant that all parts are important and actually equally weighted. And we'll see that as we talk through awards and advancement. So I don't see any hands raised. I don't see any questions yet, so I'm just going to keep on flying by. A typical schedule looks like this. So most teams will need to be there by 8 a.m. There's a coaches meeting, and we'll talk a little bit more detail later what that means. At 8:15, you'll have an opening ceremony that everyone is expected to attend. And then shortly after the opening ceremony, both judging and game rounds start. Sometimes they're staggered, and I'll show you an example of a 24-team event where those are staggered. Everyone generally has lunch around noon, might be 12:15, but somewhere around noon. And then after lunch, things continue. Generally, we'll complete sometime around 4-ish. 5:30, there's a closing ceremony, clean up, I'll go home. So that's a typical schedule. But let me show you, this was from 2022. The current version might look a little different. Let me not do a drawing mode, but being able to go here. So this is a visual overview of a 24-team event. I'm a visual person, so generally teams get randomly assigned a pit number, though that is not actually shown in MyLumi. Your schedule will be in MyLumi. It'll be customized to what you need to do, and I'll show you a view of what that will look like. It's not as pretty as the view I create in Spreadsheet Magic, but it will have, what you need to do. So if I'm in pit 1, the first thing I need to do, obviously, is I have a coach that needs to go to the coaches meeting. We all need to attend the opening ceremony. The practice round 1 is at 9:15. Then they have their judging, it looks like at 9:50. Their match 1 robot game at 11:30. Their match 2 at 1:45. Their match 3 at 2:50. We'll clean up, have some fun, and then get ready for the closing ceremony at 5:30. So you can see there's quite a bit of breaks. We do that a bit intentionally instead of cramming everything as tightly as possible, mostly because we have things that can go wrong for teams, right? So you could drop your robot, hopefully nobody does. You might get there, recognize after your practice match that you built some of the missions wrong. And so now the team has to scramble to try to recover. And so there's time in the day for improving, looking around, learning from others. And if everything is working great, then you can go and watch and cheer on everybody, right? And watch the robot games. But generally there's intentional breaks for teams so that if things are not going well, they have time to recover before the end of the day. We want every team to feel like by their match 3 that they've, had the best day possible, as well as in their judging. The team view will look a little bit like this. So this, you can see both pit 1 and pit 2 here, but it'll basically be a timeline, so you won't see the visual view of it, but it'll allow you to see, each time, when you need to be where. And generally we recommend showing up about 5 minutes early, depending on the event and the size of the event, as well as how many different buildings that you have to go into, right? So if you're at a high school gym, you may have to go into a whole nother part of the campus to go to the judging rooms. So there's a great question, and I think I have it on the next slide. So let's see. Nope, but I will answer that in a minute, which is when will the detailed schedules on MyLumi be available? So I'll answer that in a minute. I think I actually have a slide for that. So the overall goal, right, is that we are there to celebrate what the kids have done. One of the really hard things for team parents and sometimes the coaches is they make it about themselves. And trust me that that's not what we will not like that, and that is not our goal. Our goal is really about the kids. So your job as a coach or a team parent is as to cheer on and celebrate the kids, but we are there for the kids. So basically it means that the only acceptable interaction between any official, which are our judging crew and our ref crew, and any adult is merely to say thank you for volunteering. We don't expect any adult, whether that's a coach, parent, or mentor, to engage our referees or our judges, our judge advisor, our head ref in any conversation outside of just saying thank you. If there are questions about how judging is going or how the game is played, questions come from the team members to either the head referee or judge advisor during the day. Obviously, if there's a problem, you can go to the tournament director as a coach, but questions around how the team is doing, or if there needs to be clarification, which is usually around the robot game, those go to the head referee. Questions from the coach or any adult for the team are accepted only at that coach meeting. So you will meet the head referee, you will meet the judge advisor, as well as the tournament director at that coaches meeting. And that will be the only place that during the tournament day that you should be asking questions. Our judges, so there's a question that came up about, are judges and referees the same? No. We'll talk about the difference, but in general, the referees do the robot game performance. So 2.5-minute match, we'll talk about that in a minute. And the judges do that 30-minute consolidated judge interview. They are different people, and they have, basically dedicated adults that do each of those. So here are the spaces that you'll find at a typical tournament. You'll have something that is called your team pit area. That is kind of if you're part of NASCAR or car racing, that's your work area. Generally, it's all of the teams, maybe in a cafeteria. It may actually even be in the same area as the competition space if it's a very large gym. So like Gun High School, their pit area is on one side of the gym, their competition space is on the other side of that gym. So it tends to be very noisy because there's a lot of people in there. You will get a table, usually a banquet-sized table. Hopefully it's somewhere around a 6 foot. Could be a cafeteria table. You'll get maybe a few chairs, and you should have power, nearby. There will be shared challenge tables for practice if teams offer to bring them. That is something the tournament is not providing. Those are a team-provided resource. And food may or may not be allowed in the pit area. Additionally, the pits generally are open to everyone, so you need to make sure that you have a parent or somebody while the team is off doing their competition rounds or their judging, that someone is there to make sure if they're leaving stuff behind, that it stays safe. Generally, we don't have people, bothering pit areas, but sometimes that happens. So it's important that everyone stay safe and keep an eye on the pit area. The next area is your competition floor. That's where your robot game is played. Again, it'll be very noisy. There'll be one or more table pairs. So at your home, you're practicing with one table. At a tournament, those are paired back to back. So 2 teams are participating at one time. There's hopefully some spectator seating, like if it's in a gym, you'll be on a gym, bleacher seating or standing, depending on the place you're at. Like Google, they don't have bleachers in their conference rooms, as you might imagine. So that's a standing spectator area. High schools like Gunn or Leland, those would have bleacher seating. Only team members are allowed on the competition floor, no coaches or mentors. There are some exceptions for special needs, but those are very, very rare. And usually it's more around physical special needs and not other special needs. It's highly likely you will not be allowed food or drink, particularly if it's a gym floor. There will be likely music playing. There'll be an MC, announcer, there may be AV, so a lot of distractions. And it's also likely where the opening and closing ceremony is held. Additionally, there'll be judging rooms. Those are individual quiet areas for your 30-minute judge interviews. If those are, again, at a high school, most likely those are in a completely different building. So be prepared for weather. If it's raining, you may have to go outside. And then if the pits are areas where you're not allowed food, we ask the tournament to provide a place for the teams to be able to eat if they're not allowed to eat in their pit area. So that could be yet another space. Are we allowed to bring extra chairs in the pit area? I think you'll need to ask your tournament director. It depends on how much space and what type of tables they have in the pit area for the team. So if they're in a cafeteria and those are cafeteria tables, and cafeteria tables have built-in benches, you are unlikely to be able to bring in extra chairs in a way that would actually work. So it just depends on the space that you have. So it's important to ask that question of your tournament director. Somebody asked if we could go through the scoring rubric. I would recommend for the rubric, which is a judging rubric, we went through that in last week's judging Q&A webinar. I suggest that you listen to that webinar. And then the recording of this webinar will be on our resources link as I posted in the Google group this morning. Let's see, there's questions around for judging, around how the judging flowchart works and how much time is allocated for each aspect. We covered that in depth last week. I'm not going to go into that this week. But the other questions I actually am covering next. So let's keep on going. Okay. The activities, I went through a little bit when I showed the schedule, but there's an 8 a.m. team check-in. One of the really wonderful updates that I have, particularly for my returning coaches, if you know that your online team roster is 100% correct, that you don't have any adults that need to be added, like for example, if the coach or co-coach is not able to be there. So the coaches are the supervisors of the team, as you expect. You do not need to physically turn in a copy of your first team roster. This is amazing. This is the first time ever I've gotten approval that the online electronic roster, if we know it to be complete and correct, and everyone has their consent and release forms filled out, we don't have to give a piece of paper to prove that. So I'm super excited about that. All about reducing paperwork. I do recommend, however, to make sure that you have a printed copy that you can keep, just so that you can prove that it's 100% correct, or a copy that you can pull up on your phone. Like you can download the PDF and just have it on your phone, and you can show that everyone has completed their consent and release of liability waivers, which is really the important part. However, if anyone, such as you're adding a new adult because maybe one of the co-coaches is not able to be there and you're adding somebody to act as a supervisor and they aren't added on the roster, then you will need to physically turn in a copy of that team roster. You'll need to handwrite that name at the bottom of the roster and turn a copy of the consent form. The tournament will have some limited number of those consent forms available, but we can also get you a copy of that if you know you need it. So, so just recognize that if something happens, so people get sick, adults get sick, if someone gets sick and they're not able to attend as like the coach who is expected to be the team supervisor, you'll need to add an adult onto the roster. And if you cannot do that through the electronic means, you're going to have to do that by handwriting, and that's fine. We have a mechanism to handle that, but just recognize then you will have to turn in a physical copy of the team roster. Yes, there's some yays in the question box. I agree. If we have additional parents attending, do they need to get added to the roster? No, if they are just adding to be cheering squad for the team and they're not acting in the capacity as supervisor for the team, they do not need to be added to the roster. So definitely do not need that. There is a question about robot game. We covered all of the robot game questions in the robot game Q&A 2 weeks ago. I recommend that you listen to that webinar. moving forward, coaches meeting. It is mandatory that every team has somebody attending. It is not attended by the team members, and they should be in their pits setting up. And it's typically held in one of the judging interview rooms. The people who attend that coaches meeting are the head referee, the judge advisor, and the tournament director, and they each have very specific things that they'll answer questions if you have them, and that is the only time they'll answer questions from you. But also the tournament director may have some last minute important messages about things related to the tournament. As an example, we've had problems where an elevator is not working and somebody had to use a different elevator, so they need to convey that, or which bathrooms are available, or whatever last minute change that they weren't able to email out ahead of time, they need to convey to people. Maybe there's construction on campus and they need people to be aware of an area that is not to be entered. Those kinds of things, those will be handled in the coaches meeting. So what are the activities that you'll do? Again, so we have our coaches meeting. The next thing, everyone will attend the opening ceremony, and we need literally everyone to attend. There should be no one left in the pit area other than maybe a pit security or a pit a pit manager. But all of the teams should be attending the opening ceremony. Then judging and robot game will start. Each team will attend a single 30-minute judging interview during the day, and each team will have one practice game round, which is unscored, plus 3 scored game rounds. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about how each of those work. And then generally a planned lunch break for everyone, somewhere approaching noon. And in general, we try to get our closing ceremony no later than 5:30 at the latest, and it could be earlier if it's a small event. And along the way, hopefully you have lots of fun. As coaches, you should learn to manage food and mood, learn about the other teams, right? Talk to them about their project, talk about their robot. And then hopefully each of the events has either a first robotics competition team and or first tech challenge teams that are there, and you can ask them questions about their robot and their team and get an idea of what's next after first LEGO League challenge. There's a question about attending the coaches meeting. Can both coaches attend the coaches meeting? So if both coaches, the coach, lead coach 1 and the co-coach or coach 2 attend the coaches meeting, then there is nobody left to supervise who is listed on the roster as a supervising adult. So you either need to get a third adult listed onto that roster as a supervisor, or only one adult should be attending the coaches meeting. In general, that room gets pretty crowded. It's usually in one of the judging interview rooms, and usually those are designed for roughly 10 people. So if you're at a 24-team event, if every team brought 2 adults in, there is no way we would all fit. Plus the head referee, possibly the game refs, the judge advisor, and the tournament director. It's just not going to fit. So we really would like to limit it to 1 adult per team who can relay the information and ask the questions that need to get asked. Okay, so what's the results of a tournament? So at the end of the day, each tournament will give out these core awards. These are required awards from first. There will be a first place champions award at every single event, a project award, a core values award, a robot design award, a performance award, coach mentor award. If you're at a 16 or 18 or 24 team, we're adding a Rising All-Star Award, which is one of the optional awards. And if you're at one of the 24 team tournaments, we also will add a second place champions award. So those are the awards that will be given out. Those each will have a trophy associated with them, and that is one singular team trophy. A tournament will have robot game scores displayed, so they will have some mechanism for displaying those scores. Recognize that a tournament, the rubric is the only feedback that you will get from the judging process, and we're recommending for the tournament director to scan and upload those into MyLumi for coaches to have access after the event. Additionally, for qualifiers at the end, each tournament will announce the teams that advance that are invited to the championship. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So there's a question about where to find the webinars and the judging session flowchart. I will handle those questions at the end. So there's a question around, hey, we have 3 coach mentors on the first roster, but only 2 can be there in person. Is that okay? You do not have to update the roster. It is completely okay if there are people listed on the roster that are not attending, whether that's an adult or youth, it doesn't matter. Just that everybody attending is part of the team, and any person acting as coach or mentor should be on the roster and have a consent and release of liability waiver signed. There's a question about a rookie award. There is no such thing in First Lego League Challenge as a rookie award. These are all of the awards that are given out, and those are defined by First. Let me go a little bit more detail about the Robot Performance Award. So the Robot Performance Award is based solely on the robot game. It's held in the competition area. Only team members are allowed in the competition area. So basically, coaches, mentor are public and should be seated in the stands. They should not be standing right up against the barrier and shouting to the team. There will be a practice round that does not count, it's not scored, but of the 3 game rounds that are scored, it's the highest score, and the highest score will get the Robot Performance Award. It's important to note that if the team or coaches or mentors or parents have what are called egregious core values input, so very bad, extremely bad behavior from either the team members and or the adults around them, we actually have the right to withhold even the Robot Performance Award from that team. So obviously we haven't had to do this in our region. There have been regions around the world where they've had some very bad behaving adults, including having to call, the police. Thankfully, we've never had that problem in NorCal, and I hope we never ever do. So just remember that we want to have everyone understand the core values of First, the concept of being a gracious professional, and just be there, reminder that we're there for the kids. So for each of the robot games, and again, we went through this in great detail and we answered a lot of mission questions in the robot Q&A a couple weeks ago. Each match is 2.5 minutes. You will have a practice unscored match first. You will go through what's called a pre-inspection prior to going up to the table to confirm that you have exactly 1 controller, a maximum of 4 motors or less, only the legal sensors, that your Bluetooth is turned off, and only unmodified Lego pieces with the exceptions that are listed in the robot game rulebook. We do that because if we wait until your team comes up to the challenge table, and let's say that they had 5 motors instead, and usually rookies have this problem because they think, well, I only put 4 motors on the robot at one time, but I have an attachment that has another motor, but it's the summation of everything they bring to the table. So if you bring more than what's allowed, our choices at that time, when we're ready to start the match, is very limited. Basically, you have a minute to figure out how to remove one of the motors or completely unscore the match that you just, you could run it, but it won't count. You'll get a score of 0. Neither seems particularly fair. So we do this pre-inspection so that if something happens and you're bringing something up to the competition field that is not legal, say you're bringing extra mission elements, you shouldn't do that. You're bringing up a computer or a laptop, you shouldn't do that, right? Shouldn't bring up more than one controller, right? More than one brain, 4 motors. It gives you a little bit of time in the queuing, roughly 5 minutes or so, to figure out how to recover so that you don't get a score of 0. So that's why we do this pre-inspection. And again, we allow, most teams will have 30 minutes, sometimes even more, a couple hours in between their robot rounds where they can fix, iterate, adapt, because we have a lot of rookies and we try to make it so that you have the opportunity to do the best during that day that you absolutely can. And again, it's just the highest score. It's not an average, it's just the highest score that counts. So there's a question about using aftermarket Lego pieces. I don't know what you mean by aftermarket Lego pieces. If they're Lego, it doesn't matter where you've have gotten that piece of Lego from, but it has to clearly be a Lego piece. So it doesn't matter if you buy it off Bricklink or if you buy it from Lego itself or part of a kit, as long as it's a Lego piece. There are a lot of knockoffs that are not Lego. You cannot use any of the knockoffs that are not Lego. Can't 3D print your own fake Lego, right? It has to be Lego pieces. There's a question about rubber bands. Lego has official Lego rubber bands. So if you want to use rubber bands, you must use only the Lego rubber bands. So I think I've got the questions caught up for right now. And so what'll happen is the teams will go up to the queuing area, get pre-inspected. They will go and sit down in the queuing area. The team then will be invited over to their table by the referee, typically. There may be a queue manager depending on that specific event. But generally, it's the referee that will come and say, hey, team 1, we're ready for you on this table, come on up. And so the team will walk up to the table. You want to encourage your kids to talk to the referee. Our referees are there not like other sports referees. The referees there are really trying to make sure that the team can score their best in the fairest way based on all of the missions and the rules. So if they have questions, they want to know they need help picking up their robot, any of that, the referees are very generous with their knowledge and are really trying to root for the team to score their best. So definitely it's worthwhile to talk with the referee, make sure they're your friend, right? They're trying to do what's right for you. They just have to follow the rules and as outlined by FIRST. It's important to recognize that all of the scoring elements and mission models need to be in view of the referee. And generally what this means is that they either have to be on the table or in the hands of one of the technicians at the field. So they can't be in a box, they can't be taken off and handed to someone else who's not a technician at the game field. So everything and all of the attachments, everything that comes up to the table needs to be in view of the referee. Nothing can be on the floor. So if the team does have a box that they bring their robot in, we'll probably ask that the coach hold on to the box during the match so that the kids will want to put it on the floor. That becomes a tripping hazard. And we've actually had teams kind of stumble over their box, so we really don't want that to happen. It's important that the team don't touch or check themselves the field elements. This is probably the hardest thing for kids, the team, because at their home practice area, that's what they do, right? They interact with all of the field elements. So definitely this one is the hardest part of all. And then the match will typically start with 3, 2, 1, Lego, and there'll be an announcer who will announce that. They will announce time as it goes on, and then when time is up, they will also announce that. And remember that there's only 2 kids at the table at each home area at a time. And yes, kids can tag in and out, but there should still be only 2 on the left and 2 on the right. And remember that the rest of the team needs to divide either in half on either the left or the right, and there's no switching sides. So if I am on the left home area, but not one of the first technicians, and I swap in, if I'm start on the left, I have to stay only on the left. I can't move over to the right side, so there's no switching. Yes, so there's a question about can previous year's mission Lego parts be used? Absolutely, they're Lego. Can the robot be brought in a box and then handed to the coach after they take out all their parts? Yes, that's what we're recommending if they want to bring a box. So referees will then, after the match, after the 2.5 minutes, they will fill out the score sheet that's published by First. They don't score. So asking the referee what the score is, they will not know. The score sheet is literally just yes, no questions or a count. How many of these did they get? And the score sheet is in the game resources that First publishes. There is usually a scorekeeper app separately that has a computer that is tallying up that paper score sheet, and then they will display that on a projection screen. And again, it's just the highest score counts. If there are ties, there'll be the second highest, and then if there's still a tie, it'll be the third highest. We haven't had that, knock on wood, a 3-way tie across all 3 scored game matches. But if we do, what we would do for Robot Performance Award is we would toss a coin to see which team got the trophy at that event, and I would immediately order a second trophy so that the other team does get their trophy, but it would be a little bit late, but they would both win the Robot Performance Trophy if indeed after 3 scored matches, all 3 scores are tied. Can the team technicians ask the referees to wipe down the tables before the game starts? No, the referees will not have the capability, and that is not something that we would do. Generally, they're brand new mission mats that are just used for that event, and we haven't found that they get dusty, like they're just used that one day and that's it. So there is no need. They are brand new, out of the box, so to speak, mats. So one of the things to prep your teams for is that the match, after the score sheet is filled out, the referee will go over that with the team members. They will ask one team member to sign off on that score sheet. And once the team has signed off on that score sheet, that means that they agree that the score sheet is filled out correctly. If they don't agree, that's why the head referee is there. The head referee can be asked to review, and if they have questions or they don't agree with how something is scored or evaluated for the score sheet, that should be done before they sign off on it or initial it. But once the head referee kind of makes the decision and call, that is the end of the dispute. There is no escalation beyond the head referee. They are the final arbiter of the robot game. We do allow team members to come up and ask clarifying questions to the head referee later, or right after their match, if they want to get a little bit more details or want to ask some clarifying questions. Or if, like, it's a paper score sheet, they feel like the score was not entered properly. That does happen, right? We're all human. But but the questions don't come from the adults, they come from the kids. And so sometimes mistakes happen, particularly sometimes we enter the data, if it's a paper score sheet, we're entering data into a computer program that could have a problem. The head referee will fix it in the best equitable way that's possible. Sometimes that may mean that it doesn't get fixed for one whole round, and they will fix it for the second round, but they will do it as equitably as they can. There's a question about the robot game and around attachments, and we actually covered that in pretty good depth at the robot game Q&A webinar, so I really would recommend that you pay attention and listen to that webinar. And if you have additional questions at the end of this one, I tell you how to ask clarifying questions and where to send those questions. I am not going to answer game questions tonight. The head referee for our region, Phil, is the guy who will answer those. There's another question that says, can kids take turns, or do the same kids need to remain at each home area? So let me go back. I thought I covered that, but maybe so only 2 kids at each home area at a time, but they can tag freely in and out, but only 2 at the left and only 2 at the right. And the rest of the team will be behind, but they need to either be on the left or the right, right? The team is divided in half. So if you have a team of 10, you have 2 technicians on the left, 2 technicians on the right, that's 4. You have 6 remaining students. You have 3 on the left, 3 on the right. The ones on the left can swap in and out. The ones on the right can swap in and out, but they can't switch sides. Okay, let's move forward. There's some advancement questions. Actually, I want to cover this last little point. I'm excited to share we did get a technology grant, and we've purchased some tablets to be used both at the qualifier and actually at our championship. And we did this last year. We borrowed tablets. So if you're a returning coach and you went to one of our 3 championships last year, you will have seen this already. But we're excited to share that some events, and I don't know exactly which ones quite yet, will have an online game scoring. And so that's really awesome because it will allow, once that score sheet is signed off and it basically hits submit, once the magic of the internet, those bits get flying around, the coach will be able to view that score sheet and the team's rank pretty much immediately. And I put that in quotes because it depends on the speed of their internet. But basically they'll have access to that in their MyLumi dashboard. So totally excited for that. There's some really goodness to this, right? It reduces paper that we literally just throw away at the end of the day, which are those paper score sheets. It's probably one of the biggest use of paper for the day is, you know, each team times 4, right? We are working to reduce our consumption of paper for sure. So I'm excited. Your tournament director will be able to let you know if you are using the online game scoring. But super excited to have this option. Okay, let's see. Let's move on. So this is this is sort of a mock-up of what we give to the tournament directors on sort of how to set things up. There'll be a team entrance, this pre-inspection table with a couple of people there. They will sit here for queuing. The referees, even though it says this is locked or shut, it's really not. It's really open. These are the competition table pair. There's a barrier. You'll have scoring display. You might have some tables. You have a timekeeper, a DJ for music, maybe some AV. But let's take a look at what it looks like in reality. So the one on the bottom here, this would be one of our 24 team events where they have 2 pairs. They have a camera And it looks like maybe the screen on the right is the camera display, and the screen on the left might be a scoring display. They have their trophy award table here on the right, and then in the back of the gym is their pit area. This is actually not a NorCal event because that gym is way bigger than almost all of our gyms. The two on the top, I think, are NorCal events. One in a not in a gym, but in a sort of hall area, and the one on the right in a gym, but a smaller event. And so those are some examples of what it looks like, and hopefully gives our rookies an idea. There's a question about the practice match. Is it scored but not counted, or is it not even scored? In general, what we recommend to the scorekeeper is that they go ahead and go through the mechanics of at least a few teams so that they understand how to use the scorekeeper app, but it will not count and it doesn't get displayed. So you won't see it. What I recommend if you're using paper score sheets at your event is that if you have a team member that has a camera, is just snap a picture of the score sheet and you can add it up yourself. That works fine, right? So that is, an option for if you have that up. Not everyone can do that. I particularly if you have young kids, I don't know if 10-year-olds these days have cell phones. I was an adult before I had mine, so I don't quite know what the age these days are for that, but that's an option as well. But they are not scored. If they are scored, it's not published. So for that practice match. Okay, moving over to judging. And again, we ran a whole Q&A on judging. It is one consolidated judging session, and we will follow the timing in the order that first has specified in their judging flowchart. And I'm going to be nice because I've got like 50 questions about where you find those. So I'm just going to really quickly here, if you've not been here under the first LEGO League game and season, and then challenge season, everything that is from first is here. So things like your score sheet, your awards list, your rubrics, your judging session flowchart, all of those things are here. So that's where I'm referring to. Let me go back to this one. The rubrics are defined in public. I just showed you where they were. Recommend it to be on time and probably queue maybe 5 minutes early. Some events will actually have team queuers to help with this, but not all of them will. All team members are expected to participate in judging if they are present at the event. And so participation does not mean they have to talk, but it does mean they need to participate in some way. Typically, the judging rooms are near the pits or the competition floor, but recognize that many high schools, they are likely to have to go outside to a different building. The rooms are likely a bit small and have limited floor space. So if your team has a big presentation or a skit, just recognize, and if you have a large team of 10, it could be very crowded. So just keep that in mind, particularly if you have a lot of props. All of our tournaments in NorCal have a team members only policy. That means no coaches, mentors, parents, siblings. We find that to be very distracting. The only exceptions are made for very rare special cases where, depending on the degree of severity of the autism spectrum, it may be necessary for the safety of either the judges, the other teammates, or that team member themselves, that a person is in the room, an adult is in the room merely as a helper for that one specific team member. So it is very important that you communicate that to the tournament director or the judge advisor. It's best if you can communicate that to the tournament director ahead of time so they can let both the head referee and the judge advisor understand how that student exhibits under stress. and that we can best support them the way we can, right? We want to be as accommodating as possible. Um, I don't know where, there's a question around that says, I read in a slide that the team will need to unload all of their equipment, and it specifically calls out something about mission 11. I have no idea why mission 11, that may be carryover from a previous year. These slides originated in 2016, so I have no idea. If you found something with mission 11 mentioned, it would be helpful to know which page that was on. The last question is outside food allowed in pit area? It depends on the tournament. The tournament director will have to inform you of that. Are there tables in the pit area that you can practice on? If teams bring them, tournament directors are only responsible for providing the competition tables and the competition challenge sets. If the teams at that event wish to have pit practice tables, it is up to the teams themselves to bring that. And you should not carry any missions. That's right. So there's a question about bringing in the robot game into the competition area. You should not bring anything that is a mission model. That is correct. Okay, so let me give you a picture of what a judging room might look like. So there may be 2 or 3 judges. They're keeping time because, for example, your project presentation should be 5 minutes or less. And here's a small group in a classroom. This is a pretty generously large classroom. Most of our spaces are not that big. One of the things to note is that you can see there's no technology available in this classroom. I don't recommend even trying to use something like a projector. But if you plan to use something like that, you will have to bring it in. Additionally, we can't even guarantee that there will be access to power. So it may be behind a immovable bookcase. So there's no guarantee of even getting a wall socket that works. And so definitely technology is not your friend in judging. So if you want to bring in a laptop for a presentation, that's completely fine. Again, you're talking to 2 or 3 people. You're not presenting to an auditorium. There's no reason for a big display. But we have had teams bring in their own battery backup and their own displays. You're welcome to do that, but recognize that it's the kids themselves that need to bring that in. They cannot have adults helping them unless like one of them is on crutches, right? And then an adult can help that child. But generally the kids themselves need to set up, bring everything into the judging room that they need for that judging session. Okay, managing food and mood. I'm gonna move on. Actually, before I move on, I'm just gonna spend 1 minute because there's so many questions for some reason that people have not seen the flow chart. And again, you really should listen to the webinar and I will walk through where you find that. I did post it today, earlier or yesterday on the Google group. The innovation project presentation is 5 minutes. Then you get a Q&A for 5 minutes. Then there's time allocated for robot design explanation of 5 minutes. If the team does not have an explanation or presentation or anything to say here, it just means, well, the judges will ask more questions. So robot design will be 10 minutes. Then there's a final share and feedback of 8 minutes, and then the team leaves. So it's important that you know how that works. So managing food and mood, that's probably one of the major jobs of the coach or the supervising adult for the team during the day. So food, we recommend if the tournament is selling food, buy from the tournament. It's a fundraiser for their first team or for one of their clubs at their school. Please support the local school. That's why they're hosting the event there, or able to host the event there and keep it very affordable. We don't pay rent at any of our tournament sites. It would triple the cost to participate if we were charged rent at any of these locations. So if the tournament is selling food, buy something, even a bottle of water. If you're allowed to, you can bring your own food. I don't know if we have any venues. We might have one or two venues where there are limitations. So for example, the Jewish Community High School, I believe they may be keeping kosher, but the tournament director would inform you if there are restrictions about what would be allowed. Similar, the LDS Church in Palo Alto has some food restrictions as well. So I think those two may have some food restrictions that the tournament director will inform you of. Generally, if you're in the pits or the competition area is in a gym or in some of the corporate settings, food is typically not allowed in those areas and you would have to eat elsewhere. And so if there's a local restriction around food and beverage, please do obey those. Every year we have somebody who feels like, well, somebody else did it, so I can do it. I can bring in my my Starbucks mug of hot cocoa or hot coffee, even though it says no food or drink in the gym, because I'm not going to spill it. And then inevitably it spills or something happens, or the next person brings in something even worse, and it just makes a mess. So we lose sites over this issue. So please, please do obey any local restriction. Mood. The tournament day is very stressful, particularly for the kids, and things can and likely do go wrong through the day. In general, the team members will take their clues on how to react to those challenges based on the adults around them. So if you are having fun and treating it as a fun celebration, that will calm the team. They actually will perform better. It's also a really good idea to figure out what each team member needs as it means to managing stress, right? Each of us manages stress in their own way. Some people need to kind of block out sound and have a quiet space. Some people need a distraction, like a game. So just recognizing what each student might need if they are overstressed and having trouble dealing with that. So have a plan, right? In case you have a meltdown, and we've had those. I still remember the poor little Girl Scout who literally had a meltdown on one of the competition areas, and literally in the middle of the robot game, literally just had a screaming fit in the middle of the game, full on toddler, kicking and screaming and crying in the middle. And of course, we'll allow the adult to come in and pick them up and leave and get them off the competition floor. But meltdowns do happen. Bad weather happens, people get sick, so helpful to have a plan in case any of that happens, right? We have had teams show up with one team member where everybody else was sick. It's okay, we will accept that team member if they can represent the work of the team, and we recognize people get sick. It is extremely helpful if you can participate in a scrimmage, because that will actually help you figure out all of these things about the team members. So if you can participate in one of the scrimmages that have been announced, that would be really, really helpful. Okay, so let me read some questions. Will there be a sign-up sheet for buying food? It depends on what they're selling. So usually, let's say St. Martin of Tours, I know the Janksters, they typically, I think, order pizza, and they would have a sign-up sheet that the tournament director would share with you ahead of time or the morning of and say, hey, we're buying that. I don't know if they're doing that this year. I haven't heard, but I know in years past that's been a thing for them. They also have a full concession stand. There are other tournaments where that's not the case. So your tournament director will inform you of what the options are, whether they will have a concession stand at all. So are they selling anything? Are they going to have pizza or lunch option for teams? And if so, what those choices are and how to pay for it and order. So all of that would be local to the specific event. And we have 20 qualifiers. I don't know all of the details for each of the 20. Every team is required to have a volunteer, and instructions were sent to that volunteer on how to register and sign up. There's a question about how many adults are allowed in the pit area. Our pit areas are all open to the public, so there is no limitation. Just recognize that if you have, 10 parents all hanging around your one 6-foot table and you have 10 team members, you're not going to even be able to breathe, right? So, generally figuring out how to swap in and out is a good idea. There's a question I don't quite understand. It says 1 parent per kid ? And these adults have to be part of the roster. I don't quite know what that question's about, but then the same person asked a question about, do volunteers get the opportunity to watch their own team's robot game matches? It depends on what role that they sign up for. So there is a description of each of the robot game, each of the tournament roles. So, if they are pit security, then no, they're going to be in the pit area. And unless that pit area is in the same area as the competition space, they're going to be in a completely different area than the robot game. If they are doing inspection, the pre-inspection, then they're going to be exactly right in the same area. If they're going to do field reset, right? So it depends on what role they sign up for. As to whether that volunteer will be able to watch the robot game. Okay, let me keep moving because I am now over time and I expected to get through this presentation already. I'm almost done. Things to bring to the tournament. I can't stress enough around the gracious professionalism and the flexible attitude. Every single person at an event is a volunteer, including the tournament director. No one is getting paid. We're not paying rent, right? So it's really, really important if you find a problem to help figure out how to solve it. Be an asset, not a liability for the tournament director who's probably running around trying to solve problems. The last thing is that those pit practice tables have to come from the teams. So if you are able to bring a table and challenge kit, everyone would appreciate that. But and sometimes, most of the time, the tournament director will allow you to do that instead of offering a team volunteer. So that's a great way, if you're able to transport a table and challenge kit for pit practice, sometimes that'll substitute for a team volunteer. Usually that's the way it does. Some other things that are suggestions, it's great to have some giveaway items, but please nothing sticky, no stickers, those are horrible. Many times at the end of an event that I run, I have to go around and actually scrape off stickers off gym floors. Really not fun. It's great to have some decorations that you can hang on your pits. Recognize that you may not be able to hang anything, right? So just recognize there may be limited space, but it's fun to have some kind of decorations. It's fun to have a team flag or something that announces the team that as they walk around from their activities. And I recommend bringing a tablecloth to cover your pit table because some of them are pretty grody. Let me go into a little bit around of awards and advancement. Again, I only have 2 more slides, and then we'll go into a little bit more about advancement, which I have a completely separate presentation that I sent out. It's linked into the FAQ document, but I will go through it if there are questions. So awards and advancement. So judges do not decide robot performance. That's your robot game, and those are done by referees. But a reminder, they can remove a team if they receive egregious core values input. Hopefully no one is egregious. You have to look up that word. It means very, very bad. Judges will decide the awards in this order. The first is Champions Award, which is the overall, equally weighted across each of the 3 judged areas, which is robot design, innovation project, and then the core values, which actually comes out of the other 2, along with robot game performance. And it's based on the rank. And I'll talk through how they will decide that in my next presentation, like shortly after this. Then if there's a second place Champions Award, like a 24 team, they'll decide that. Then they will do the other awards. If there's a Rising All-Star, they'll do that one. And then finally, they'll do advancement. Teams will only win one judged award, with the exception of coach mentor. So a team could in fact win robot performance. They could also win coach mentor award and receive a judge's award. So a team could in fact walk away with 3 trophies. It would be not unheard of. It's not common, but it's not unheard of. A lot of times the first place performance wins one of the other awards, but not always. So it just depends on how that goes. It's important to recognize that advancement is not considered an award, and that a team may win a judged award and not advance, as well as a team that it could advance but not win an award, right? So those are not the way advancement works. It's not based on winning an award. Okay, second to last slide, some updates around our qualifiers. We'll have 3 championships. They will be one for the San Jose qualifiers. There will be one for all of the rest of the South Bay Peninsula qualifiers. There'll be a 3rd championship with all of the other events. So that's Fremont, all of the East Bay, San Francisco, Modesto, and Sacramento areas. Those will all be in one championship. So 6 or 7 qualifiers in each of them, roughly 30% advancement. And so based on where your qualifier is, that will define which championship that your team would advance to. So as an example, Leland High School's in San Jose, that would advance to the San Jose Championship. The dates for those championships, I'm trying really hard to get the dates on the calendar. I'm still looking for a San Jose site. I have inquiries out for the other 2 and some proposed dates. Once those get confirmed, I will announce them, but they will be between January and March. Advancing teams are announced at the closing ceremony of the tournament, and you should receive a certificate that's filled out with your team name on it. Recognize we also maintain a wait list that is not announced of the next advancing team in case somebody has trouble attending that event. So there's a question about how a team that does not get award advance, and I have a great presentation that I'm going to go into right after this that will actually go through that example. So that is a great, so if you understand how advancement works and you don't wish to stay on the call, you can drop now. I know I have a couple hands raised that I've been ignoring. I'm going to unmute a couple people, but if game questions that were not answered in the Q&A webinar, you can send to FLL Game. Judging questions that were not answered in the Q&A webinar should go to judging. And please do listen to the webinar. We're not generally going to repeat what we've already said in the webinar just because you don't want to listen to it. So where that is, so if you go to our local webpage, right, so NorCal FLLC, scroll down, we have a resources link. And all of our webinars for this season are all right here. So you definitely can, there's the robot game Q&A, there's the judging Q&A, and after tonight, tonight's will be on this one. So they'll all be on this resource links. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here. I'm gonna unmute a few folks. We'll answer a few questions, and then I'm gonna go into advancement. Okay, I think it's Y-I. I'm gonna unmute you. You'll have to unmute yourself. You have a question?
our time. So I
Hi.
was wondering, hi. So I guess my question is, does every team need to have a volunteer for the event?
Yes.
And how do they register?
So their instructions were given when you filled out your JOT form. You sent an email address to, entered the volunteer's email address. They were given an email on what they needed to do, those instructions. But generally, they need to sign up as a volunteer into the event that you have registered for. So whatever qualifier that you signed up for, they should apply to be a volunteer at that event. And they can select up to 5 roles as long as they don't apply. They should not apply as a referee, a head referee, a judge advisor, or judge. So as long as they open to any of the other roles that are listed, they should apply for.
Who received the email? The coach of the team?
The volunteer was
Oh, the
directly
volunteer.
emailed. It probably landed in their spam folder, so have them check their spam folder.
Oh, okay. So the volunteer needs to register online first, and then they're gonna receive an email. The volunteer is gonna receive an email.
No, they already should have received an email. When you filled out, if you're the coach, you filled out something called a JOT form. Is that right? You filled out the JOT form?
In where?
In MyLumi, there's a team info form
Oh,
that was filled out.
okay. Yes, correct.
You entered the volunteer's name and you entered the volunteer's email.
Yes, I did. Okay.
Email triggered an email to the volunteer with instructions.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll ask them to. Yeah.
I'm going to mute you. The other hand I had raised is gone. So I'm going to, as I said, hang on for a little bit. And then I'm going to go over to walk through advancement and answer any questions about how a team could win an award and not advance, as well as how can a team advance and not win an award, because I think this is a common problem. It's a math problem. Okay, so you're welcome to hang on. Let me move over to our advancement. So this was linked into the FAQ document that I sent out in the last Google group message. So you don't have to take notes or whatever. You have access to this slide deck separately, and it's really helpful to walk this through with your team parents so they understand it as well. So some of this is just replicating what I just said. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. But here's an example. So again, the judges fill out the rubrics. Each of the rubrics has a score 1 through 4, and I can actually show you that. Let's come here, let's open the rubric up, and we'll go to page 2, and you can see there's a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So under identify, if they got a unclear definition of the problem and they got a mark here, that means that they would get a score of 1 for this line. Then on this one, where they say maybe they have amazing research, they weren't sure what problem they were trying to solve, but they did great research. So maybe they got accomplished under research. Oh, recognize that this is looking like a gear, that actually counts for core values as well. So they would get a 3 for this line for project, and it would also count as a 3 as part of their core value score. So every line is scored, and the ones that have this little icon are scored for both this area as well as core values. And each of them is 10, right? So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 here. There are 5 gear lines here, and there are 10 lines here for robot design and 5 gear core value lines. So core values is 5 from project, 5 from robot design, plus the GP scores from the score sheet. So that's how core values is set. It's a math problem, okay? So you get a score, right? Each of those lines, 1 to 4, max scores of 40, right? For project, 40 for robot design, it's actually a 49, or excuse me, it's not a 49, it's a 40 plus 12, it's a 52 max score for core values. None of that matters. What matters is rank. So the relative score, if everyone scored 40, everybody would be rank 1. So, you know, you could have lots of 4s, 3s and 4s, but if lots of teams have lots of 3s and 4s, you could feel like, oh, I've got, you know, 35 of a score, that should be really good. But if everybody else has got a 35 or better, you know, it's really around the rank. So, and there can be ties. So let's go through our example. I have a mythical 12-team qualifier with 30% advancement. So this is 30%. We're going to advance 4 people, 4 teams. And there's a couple different pods. In this case, I think there were 2 pods scoring. So there's your robot design rank, right? So actually, let's start over here on the left. This is your robot game performance. That's publicly shared, right? So the stuff over here on the left is known. You can see Team A got a score of 200. It could have been 400. It really doesn't matter. It's just, this is a first place, second place. So you could score twice as much as somebody else, but it doesn't matter. They're still in second place. So sometimes teams that focus a lot on robot game and they have a very high score compared to the rest of the competitors don't quite understand this because they feel like, hey, we scored so much better on robot game score. How come we didn't advance? Because it has not to do with the absolute score. It has to do with the rank. So it's an important thing for you to recognize. These next ranks all come from the rubric and they are not shared. You will never see, there's nothing published on the relative ranks of each of the teams. So in this mythical example, that team, believe it or not, scored a 5 on their robot design rank. They got a 1 on project. They scored a 5 on core values. So their overall rank is, you add these up, so 1 plus 5 plus 1 plus 5 gave them a score of 12. Now, as it turns out, that gives them an overall rank of first place. However, you can see Team B has exactly the same overall score and is exactly the same overall rank. And actually, Team G has exactly the same overall score and thus overall what's called the champions rank. So we've got a 3-way tie for first place. Any of those teams could, in fact, win the Champions Award. In fact, let's go through that. So in this example, there are 3 teams, and the judges would need to discuss each team. That's called deliberation, and they would have to fundamentally pick one. And it can be very frustrating if you're not the one, because you did really well across many areas. But only one of those 3 teams will actually win the Champions Award. So in our example, we're going to choose Team A. It could have easily have been Team Team B or Team G. Any of those could have won them. But maybe we'll assume that Team A, in this example, won Champions Award. Well, now that means they cannot win Project Award, even though they were first place for Project Award. They can still win the Robot Game Performance Award. That is allowed because that is not a judged award. So they will still get that trophy, even if they don't do anything else. They would always get that trophy as the first place robot game performance. So then maybe after much deliberation, they decide on this group that we're going to give Team G project. Even though they were ranked 1 in core values, they decided that actually that project was the really good, and better than, for example, Team B's. And they really felt after discussing that Team G should get project award. And then maybe looking at it, they decide, obviously, I think this is obvious that Team B should win robot design, and then Team E would win core values. You go, well, why isn't G winning core values too? Well, because they won project in this example, right? So a team will win exactly one judged award. Alternatively, that after the judges deliberate, let's say that they decide, nope, we're not going to go with Team A to win the Champions Award. We're going to go with Team B to win the Champions Award. Well, then Team B cannot win robot design. Team A still gets the robot performance award. But now in this example, again, the same data, but the judges deliberate and decide B gets champions. Team C, they decide could win, even though it's tied with G, they'll talk about them and decide in this example, that Team C would win robot design. And then maybe they decide that G still should win core values, or not still, because they didn't in the last example, right? So any of these are valid outcomes and can only come after that deliberative process. Another acceptable alternative is that Team G win Champions Award. Well, then Team G cannot win core values. Team A still wins their robot performance. Maybe after deliberation, they give project to A. Team B, they're going to give robot design, and Team E would then likely win core values. And again, they're discussing and deciding based on the data of rank. So these three outcomes literally are all valid and all correct, but all you know is the robot game scores and which teams were awarded and then advanced. But any of these three outcomes could be valid. So now let's decide advancement. So here's our same data. We actually have 4 teams that advance. So there's 3 obvious ones, right? We've got 3 that are in overall rank number 1, A, B, and G. So those are the obvious choices. But now they need to pick one more. And so looking at this data, they would likely discuss team C and D. And unless one of those teams had, very bad core values reports, either of those could advance. They're tied. It could go either way, and either would be a valid outcome. So maybe in example 1, they decide A, B, G, and then they pick C. And in another time, they pick D. Again, any of that would be valid. And so that's probably the hardest thing for people to really understand. Again, looking at the data, none of this is shared, but that is the level of decision making and deliberation that the judges have to go through. Particularly when all of our events have 2 or 3 pods of judges, there are many ties. Every pod will have a number 1 and a number 2. So as soon as you have, 2 parallel tracks of judges looking at teams within their panel or their pod of teams, they will have who was first and who was second. So if you're at a 24 team event, there are 4 pods of judges. So that's 4 number 1 teams that they're going to have to be discussing against. And so it could go a lot of different ways, and it is a deliberative process. They talk in detail about, like for example, the 4s. If a team got 4s, why was it a 4? They try to make the best decision, but many times it could go either way. And I know that is so hard for all of us. We'd like to have perfect visibility. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to share the judging ranks. All we can share is the outcomes. So I'm going to pause there, see what questions that might exist around advancement. And again, you have access to this It's linked in the FAQ document that I just posted about in the last Google group message. I don't see any questions, new questions come up. So, so I'm hopeful this was clear. Again, you have access to it. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to hang on for a little bit longer. If there are questions, again, there's a question around the advancing rate. I thought I covered that. Let's see. Maybe I didn't. It'll be roughly 30% this year. So somewhere around just over 30%. I think what I'm currently leaning to is that 12 team events will advance 4, 16 team events will advance 5, 18 team advance 6, I think, or 5 or 6, I think 6, and then the 24 team will advance 8, which I think is what I'm settling on. But I will forward that. That will get sent out on the Google group in the next day or so. What email address did the email for volunteers come from? I believe it will either come from, this is from the JOT form. You as a coach should have received a copy of an email confirmation. It should come from the same, the exact same place, I think, but I can check. Let me see if I can quickly check for you on the side. I gotta move my screens around so that I can check. Just give me a second. Let me actually stop the recording because I don't think we need to have this level there.